The bed was cold, not the kind of cold left behind by an open window, the kind that lingered after someone had already decided they weren't coming back. Darius Blackmore reached across the mattress without opening his eyes. His hand met nothing. No warmth, no heartbeat, only perfectly folded blankets. His eyes snapped open. "Eric's?" Silence answered. The Alpha King searched every room of the royal chambers, the sitting room, the library, the balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Empty. A quiet unease settled deep in his chest. When he returned to the bedroom, something caught his attention. Resting neatly on Eric's pillow were two things: a simple silver wedding ring and a folded letter. For reasons he couldn't explain, Darius hesitated before opening it. Inside, written in Eric's familiar handwriting, were only a few lines. "You promised never to mark me. I finally realized you never truly chose me either. I'm not leaving because I stopped loving you. I'm leaving because I finally started loving myself." By the time Darius reached the final sentence, his hands were trembling. He rushed toward the palace doors. "Prepare my horse." The guards looked at one another. "Your Majesty, find Eric's." The order echoed through the castle. Servants scattered. Royal guards searched every corridor. Scouts rode through the capital before sunrise. But Eric's Rowan had vanished. Not a single witness had seen him leave. Not a single wolf had caught his scent. It was as though the moon herself had carried him away. For the first time since ascending the throne, Darius discovered something his authority could not command: someone's heart. 4 years earlier, the entire Western Territories celebrated beneath a full moon. Silver banners stretched across the royal courtyard, as wolves from every allied pack gathered to witness a union, blessed by the moon goddess herself. "The destined mates have been chosen," the high priest announced. "The Alpha King, Darius Blackmore, and Eric's Rowan." Cheers erupted across the palace. Counselors smiled with relief. The alliance between the great packs was finally secure. Eric stood quietly beside Darius, his heart overflowing with hope. He had admired the young Alpha for years, not because of his crown, but because Darius had always seemed fearless when protecting others. When the ceremony ended, nobles congratulated them late into the evening. After everyone had retired, Darius asked Eric's to meet him alone in the palace gardens. Moonlight reflected across the lake between them. For a long moment, Darius said nothing. Then he spoke so softly that only Eric's could hear. "I'll marry you because the council demands it." Eric's smile faltered. Darius continued without meeting his eyes. "But I'll never mark you as my Omega." The world seemed to stop. Eric searched his face, waiting for a smile, a joke, anything. There was nothing. Darius finally looked at him. "If my enemies know you're marked, they'll know exactly how to hurt me. I won't give them that opportunity. It isn't because I don't respect you. It's because a king can't afford weaknesses." Eric's wanted to believe him. He truly did. So he forced a gentle smile. "If remaining unmarked keeps our kingdom safe, then I'll accept it." Darius nodded, relieved. Neither of them realized that night they had accepted two entirely different futures. One believed he was sacrificing a symbol. The other had quietly sacrificed the certainty that he was loved. The following evening, before thousands of cheering wolves, they exchanged vows beneath the blessing of the moon goddess. They became husband and husband, alpha and spouse, king and consort. But when the sacred moment came for the alpha to complete the bond, Darius stepped back. The ceremonial marking never happened. The crowd assumed it had been postponed for royal tradition. Only Eric's knew the truth. As the celebration continued around them, he instinctively touched the untouched place on his neck, where every mated Omega dreamed of carrying the mark of the one they loved. For the first time, the happiest day of his life felt strangely incomplete. He didn't know it then, but the emptiness he felt beneath the moon that night would quietly grow with every passing year. 4 years passed. To the kingdom, Darius and Eric's looked like the perfect royal couple. The Alpha King ruled with wisdom. His gentle spouse ruled with compassion. Together, they seemed unshakable. Only they knew how lonely the palace truly was. Every morning, Eryx woke before sunrise. Before the servants stirred, he was already in the royal kitchen, preparing Darius's favorite breakfast. Afterward, he reviewed the day's diplomatic meetings, inspected the palace infirmary, and visited elderly wolves who could no longer travel. When winter storms buried mountain villages beneath snow, Eryx organized food caravans himself. When orphaned pups needed homes, he found them families. The wolves adored him. Children ran into his arms, shouting, "Luna Eryx!" The elders smiled whenever he passed. "Our kingdom is fortunate," they often said. "The moon goddess truly blessed our Alpha King." Eryx always smiled politely. Only he knew how incomplete that blessing felt. At royal banquets, neighboring alphas praised Darius's leadership. Then someone would inevitably ask, "And who is this remarkable man beside you?" Darius's answer never changed. "My spouse." Never, "My mate." Never, "My omega." The omission lasted only 2 words. Yet it echoed through Eryx's heart, long after every banquet ended. He never complained. He simply carried the silence home with him. One spring morning, the palace physician requested a private audience. When Eryx arrived, the elderly healer's eyes glistened with joy. "Congratulations." Eryx frowned. "For what?" The physician laughed softly. "You're carrying a pup." The room seemed to brighten. Eryx instinctively rested a trembling hand against his stomach. A child. The tiny life growing inside him felt like hope itself. That evening, unable to contain his happiness, he found Darius studying military reports. "I have wonderful news." Darius looked up, smiling for what felt like the first time in weeks. "What is it?" Eryx placed the physician's report in his hands. "We're going to be parents." The smile disappeared. Not because Darius was unhappy, because fear overtook everything else. He slowly lowered the report. "No one can know." Eryx blinked. "What?" "The council. The palace staff. No one. But why?" Darius stood and walked toward the window. "If rival packs discover we're expecting an heir, they'll see our child as leverage." His voice remained steady. "We'll keep the pregnancy secret until it's safe." Eryx looked at the man he loved. Once again, love had been answered with strategy, joy with caution, family with politics. A week later, thousands gathered for the Grand Moon Festival to honor the Alpha King's years of peaceful rule. As the master of ceremonies raised his voice, he smiled toward the royal platform. "And now, we invite the Alpha King's beloved to stand beside him." Every eye turned toward Eryx. Before he could take a single step, Darius quietly lifted one hand. "No, my personal life has no place in matters of leadership." The crowd applauded his discipline. Only Eryx understood what those words truly meant. The applause followed Darius long after the ceremony ended. The Alpha King is so disciplined. He never lets emotion interfere with duty. Our kingdom couldn't ask for a stronger ruler. Every compliment felt like another stone placed upon Eryx's heart. No one had noticed the way his smile disappeared. No one had seen him quietly leave the royal platform before the celebrations were over. By the time Darius returned to the palace, another emergency meeting had demanded his attention. Trade disputes, border security, council reports. The kingdom always seemed to need him. Eryx had spent 4 years convincing himself that one day it would need him too. That night, he sat alone in their bedroom. Moonlight spilled across the floor, illuminating the untouched side of the bed, where Darius rarely slept before midnight. His hand drifted instinctively to his stomach. "Our little one," he whispered. "I don't know what kind of father he'll become." His voice trembled. "But I know what kind of childhood I don't want you to have. A childhood where love was hidden, where family was treated like a political inconvenience, where being chosen depended on whether it was convenient." Eryx quietly stood. He opened the wardrobe and removed a single travel bag. He didn't take jewelry. He didn't take expensive clothes. He didn't even take the gifts nobles had given him over the years. Only a few simple outfits. The physician's report confirming his pregnancy, a worn photograph from happier days, and enough money to begin again, somewhere no one knew his name. When he finished packing, he removed the silver wedding ring from his finger. For a long time, he simply stared at it. It had represented hope, then patience. Finally, loneliness. He placed it gently on Darius's pillow. Beside it, he laid a folded letter. He wrote slowly, making sure every word came from peace instead of anger. You promised never to mark me. For years, I believed I could live without the mark, if I still had your heart. Now I understand I have neither. I'm not leaving because I stopped loving you. I'm leaving because our child deserves to grow up, seeing what it looks like to be chosen. One day, I hope you understand the difference. Before dawn, Eric slipped quietly through the palace gates. No guards stopped him. No servants questioned him. The future Luna of the kingdom disappeared, with nothing more than one suitcase and the quiet determination to protect the tiny heartbeat growing inside him. Hours later, Darius pushed open the bedroom door. Eric's. Silence. His eyes landed on the neatly made bed. Then the ring. Then the letter. As the truth settled over him, the color drained from his face. For the first time in 4 years, the palace felt impossibly empty. By sunset, the entire kingdom was searching for Eric's. Royal guards rode through forests. Scouts followed every trade route. Messengers carried the Alpha King's orders to neighboring territories. Find my husband. No one did. It was as if Eric's had disappeared into the wind. For weeks, Darius barely slept. Every report ended the same way. No sign of him. The palace physician finally entered Darius's study with trembling hands. There is something your majesty should know. Darius looked up hopefully. You found him? The old healer slowly shook his head. No. But Eric's was carrying your pup. The room fell silent. Darius stared at him. What did you say? He learned about the pregnancy a week before he left. I believed he had already told you. The words struck harder than any blade. His child, his heir, gone. And Eric's had walked away believing he was protecting their unborn pup from a life of emotional absence. For the first time, Darius understood the full weight of his own decisions. Meanwhile, far beyond the western territories, where the sea met towering cliffs, a small coastal pack welcomed a weary traveler, carrying little more than a suitcase and quiet determination. Its leader was Alpha Lucan Vale, Darius's oldest political rival. Lucan recognized Eric's immediately. He also recognized the exhaustion hidden behind his polite smile. I know who you are, Lucan said gently. Eric's lowered his eyes. If you're sending me back. I'm not. Lucan glanced toward a row of cottages overlooking the ocean. There's an empty one near the lighthouse. It's small, but it's warm. You and your child may stay as long as you wish. No bargains, no conditions, no questions, only kindness. Months later, as waves crashed softly against the shore, Eric's gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He named him Kieran. The tiny pup inherited silver-gray eyes from his father. Whenever Kieran cried during sleepless nights, Lucan quietly appeared carrying warm soup or fresh blankets. He never crossed boundaries, never pretended to replace anyone. He simply noticed when help was needed. Years passed. Kieran learned to walk while chasing seagulls along the beach. He learned to laugh while building sandcastles beside Lucan. He learned that home was the place where people came back every evening. One afternoon, after Lucan finished teaching him how to skip stones across the water, Kieran tugged gently on his sleeve. Alpha Lucan? Yes? The little boy smiled shyly. Can I call you Dad? Lucan's heart stopped for a moment. His answer came softly. Only if your heart truly wants to. Kieran grinned. It already does. Unseen from the cottage window, Eric's quietly wiped away a tear. 7 years passed as quietly as the tides. The little cottage by the sea became a home filled with laughter instead of silence. Every morning, Kieran raced barefoot down the path to the docks before Lucan could finish his coffee. "You're going to trip again," Lucan called. "I won't." 3 steps later, Kieran stumbled over a loose stone. Lucan caught him before he hit the ground. "I almost had it," the boy mumbled with a sheepish grin. "You almost always do," Lucan laughed, brushing the sand from his knees. It became their favorite joke. Life settled into gentle routines. Lucan taught Kieran how to cast a fishing line into the ocean without frightening the fish. He showed him how to repair broken fences after storms. When Kieran struggled to read difficult words, Lucan patiently sounded them out beside the fireplace. When nightmares woke him in the middle of the night, Lucan never told him to be brave. He simply sat beside his bed until the fear passed. None of it was dramatic. None of it was extraordinary. It was simply consistent. Eric's watched quietly from the doorway, more times than either of them realized. He had once believed love needed grand promises. Now he understood that love often looked like remembering someone's favorite soup when they were sick, or never missing a school recital, or showing up every single time. Lucan never once discouraged Kieran from asking about his biological father. "If you ever want to know about him," he would say, "your papa will tell you the truth." He never competed for the title of father. He earned it without asking. One evening, after Kieran scored the winning point during the village's annual youth games, he ran across the field without hesitation. "Dad!" Lucan turned just in time to catch the laughing boy in his arms. "You saw it? I saw all of it. I told you I'd win. I never doubted you." Nearby, Eric smiled through misty eyes, not because Kieran had called another alpha dad, but because his son had grown up never questioning whether he was loved. Far away, in the Western Territories, dark clouds gathered over the mountains. Days of relentless rain caused rivers to burst their banks. Entire villages disappeared beneath rising water. Messengers rode through every neighboring kingdom, carrying urgent requests for aid. For the first time in decades, every Alpha King, including Darius Blackmore and Lucan Vale, would have to stand on the same battlefield, not against each other, but against the flood threatening them all. The floodwaters swallowed entire villages within hours. Bridges collapsed. Roads disappeared beneath raging rivers. Families climbed onto rooftops, praying rescue boats would reach them before nightfall. For the first time in generations, rival packs fought the same enemy, nature. Darius Blackmore arrived with the Royal Rescue Force before dawn. Lucan Vale's wolves were already there, pulling children from flooded homes and guiding frightened elders to higher ground. There were no political speeches, no territorial disputes, only desperate people who needed saving. Darius worked without rest. Hour after hour, he carried survivors through chest-deep water, ignoring the ache in his muscles. Then he noticed a small figure scrambling across the remains of a broken bridge. A young boy, no older than 7. Instead of running to safety, the child was climbing toward a cluster of frightened wolf pups, trapped inside a drifting cart. "What are you doing?" Darius shouted. The boy didn't stop. "They're scared." Using a fallen beam, the child reached the cart and gently lifted each trembling pup into a rescue boat before jumping across the widening gap himself. The boat rocked violently. The pups were safe. So was the boy. Darius couldn't explain why his chest tightened as he watched him. Silver-gray eyes, dark hair, the stubborn determination to help others before himself. The child looked hauntingly familiar. Before Darius could speak, the boy spotted someone standing on the riverbank. His face lit up. "Dad." He sprinted through the shallow water. Not toward Darius, toward Lucan. Laughing, Lucan lifted him effortlessly into his arms. "You promised you'd stay with Papa." "I did." The boy looked guilty, but the pups needed help. Lucan sighed, though pride softened his expression. "Next time, wait for me." "I will." Only then did Eric step from the medical tent carrying dry blankets. Time seemed to stop. Their eyes met across the flooded shoreline. 7 years had changed them both. Eric's looked stronger, peaceful. The quiet sadness Darius remembered had disappeared. In its place stood someone who had finally found the life he deserved. The boy looked between them curiously. "Papa?" Eric swallowed. "Kieran, there is someone you should meet." Before another word could be spoken, Darius slowly fell to one knee in the muddy water. Not as a king, not as the feared alpha of the Western Territories, but as a man finally standing before the family he had spent 7 years searching for. Rain continued to fall around them. No one moved. Rescue workers paused where they stood. The gathered alphas watched in stunned silence. No one had ever seen Darius Blackmore kneel before another person, yet there he was, his clothes soaked with mud and rain, looking not like a king, but like a man carrying 7 years of regret. "Eric's." His voice cracked for the first time in anyone's memory. "I was wrong." The words hung in the air. "I thought refusing to mark you would keep you safe." He lowered his head. "I never realized it only made you believe I was ashamed of loving you." Eric's listened quietly. There was no anger in his expression, only a calmness that time had patiently built. "I loved you," Darius continued. "I still do. I convinced myself that every sacrifice I made was for our future." A bitter smile crossed his face. "But I kept sacrificing the very people I claimed I was protecting." Slowly, he stood. His trembling hand reached toward Eric's. "If you'll let me, I'll mark you now." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sacred mating mark, the very promise Darius had withheld for years. He was finally offering it. 7 years too late. Eric's glanced at the untouched place on his neck. Once, he had dreamed of that moment. He had imagined it countless nights while crying himself to sleep beside the Alpha King. Back then, he would have given anything to hear those words. Today, he smiled gently. "No." Darius's hand slowly fell. "I don't reject your apology. I accept it." His voice remained soft. "But I no longer need your mark to know my worth." He looked toward Kieran, who stood safely beside Lucan. "For years, I believed being unmarked meant I wasn't enough. I finally learned that my value was never determined by what was missing from my neck. It was determined by the love I chose to give, and the love I finally allowed myself to receive." Tears blurred Darius's vision. Every sentence revealed what he had stolen from the man standing before him. Not a title, not a ceremony, but years of believing he was somehow less deserving of love. Eric's stepped closer, close enough that only Darius could hear his next words. "I spent 4 years waiting for you to choose me." He smiled sadly. "I won't spend the rest of my life waiting again." Darius closed his eyes. The truth hurt more than any punishment the moon goddess could have given him, because some gifts lose their meaning when they arrive too late. The rescue camp slowly returned to life. Families reunited. Children laughed through tears. The floodwaters had taken homes, but they had not taken hope. Darius remained for several days, helping rebuild the villages alongside every other alpha. For the first time in years, he gave no orders from a throne. He carried lumber, cooked meals, helped repair fishing boats damaged by the storm. One afternoon, Kieran wandered over while Darius was repairing a broken fence. "You've never done this before, have you?" the boy asked innocently. Darius laughed. "Is it that obvious?" Kieran nodded. "The boards are upside down." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then both of them burst into laughter. It was awkward, small, but real. Later that evening, Darius approached Eric's outside the seaside cottage. The ocean stretched endlessly behind them. "I won't ask you to come back." Eric's looked at him quietly. "I've already lost that right." He took a slow breath. "But I am asking for one chance. Not to be your husband, to be Kieran's father." Tarek studied the man before him. Gone was the Alpha King who measured every decision by politics. Standing before him was simply a father who understood how much time he had already wasted. Before Eric's could answer, Lucan stepped onto the porch. For a brief moment, silence settled between the three men. Then Lucan spoke first. "This isn't my decision." He looked at Eric's with quiet respect. It never was. Eric's nodded gratefully. He turned back to Darius. "Kieran deserves to know where he comes from." Relief flickered across Darius's face. "But understand this," Eric's continued gently. "Fatherhood isn't something you reclaim with apologies. It's something you earn through presence." Darius nodded immediately. "I understand. No royal escorts, no ceremonies, no promises you can't keep. Just come." The following month, Darius returned, carrying nothing more than a backpack and 2 fishing rods. The month after that, he came again, then again. Sometimes they fished, sometimes they built kites, sometimes they simply sat on the beach watching the waves. Slowly, Kieran stopped seeing the legendary Alpha King. He began seeing the man who never missed another visit, and for the first time, Darius stopped trying to earn forgiveness with words. He started earning trust with time. 5 years passed. The little boy who once chased seagulls along the shore had grown into a confident young alpha. At 12, Kieran stood tall for his age, with his father's silver-gray eyes and his papa's gentle heart. The coastal pack gathered beneath the full moon for Kieran's coming-of-age ceremony, the tradition marking the day a young wolf formally pledged to protect the people he loved. Wolves from every allied territory attended. Among them stood 2 alphas who had shaped Kieran's life in very different ways. Lucan arrived early, as he always did, helping arrange chairs and greeting neighbors by name. Darius arrived quietly, without a royal escort or ceremonial guards. He no longer announced his presence with trumpets. He simply came, because that was what fathers did. When Kieran stepped onto the platform, the pack elder smiled. "As is our custom, the young alpha may honor those who guided him." Kieran looked toward the crowd. His eyes found Eric's first. "Papa, you taught me that love never asks someone to become smaller, just to make another person feel stronger." Eric's wiped away a tear. Then Kieran turned to Lucan. "Dad, thank you for showing up every single day, for teaching me that families aren't built by promises. They're built by breakfast, fishing trips, homework, and always coming home." Lucan smiled, his eyes glistening with quiet pride. Finally, Kieran faced Darius. The crowd grew still. He walked across the stage until he stood directly before the Alpha King. Years ago, Darius would have expected a title. Today, he expected nothing. Kieran smiled. "Father, thank you for proving that people can change. You missed my first steps, my first words, my first day of school." He paused. "But you never missed another birthday after you came back. You taught me that being late isn't the same as giving up." Darius could no longer hold back his tears. After the ceremony ended, he quietly approached Eric's and Lucan. "I've signed the new royal decree," he said. "From this day forward, no alpha in the allied territories may refuse or delay a mating mark without the informed and willing consent of both partners. No one will ever spend years questioning their worth because of fear, disguised as protection." Eric's looked at him and smiled, not with the love they once shared, but with genuine peace. Some stories end with lovers finding their way back. Theirs did not. Instead, it became something quieter, and perhaps even rarer. A family shaped not by possession, but by choice. As the moon rose over the sea, Kieran stood between the 3 people who had made him who he was. One had given him life. One had given him a home. One had learned, painfully, how to become the father he deserved. The moon goddess had never demanded perfection, only courage. The courage to choose love before pride. And when that choice came too late, the courage to spend the rest of your life making sure it was never too late again.